Give me what you honestly think about these people, okay? Give me what do you think about John Steenhuisen?
A racist.
What do you think about Julius Malema?
Is an EFF leader.
Okay. What?
Sorry, he's an EFF leader that loves ATM.
Okay. Okay. What do you think about Helen Zille?
She's someone who should have retired from politics, but is still staying in politics. But because it's a white person, no one is complaining.
What? Okay. What do you think about Musi Maimane?
He.
Thank you so much for that, and welcome to the GLC Podcast. Today is a very special episode because for the very first time we've got a live audience. So we are looking forward to the robust engagements and to the questions that will be coming from the audience. My name is Luphumlo Joka, and I'm excited to be sharing the stage today with the president of ATM. I almost said the president of AIM, the president of ATM. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time. So, as I said earlier on, we want to center this conversation around solutions, and we want to zoom into the track record of ATM, what you guys have been doing in Parliament, in some communities around South Africa. Firstly, thank you for being here. Let's start from the beginning, and maybe let's start where the political bug bit you. So how did you become conscientized about politics in South Africa?
I could say from birth, the difference that we have, or the issue that we have, is that many people are not part of political parties by taking membership forms, but the life and struggles of politics, they affect them on a day-to-day basis. You may find that a person is a community leader. If you look from the lens of a political party, you could say this person is not in politics, but the issues they're dealing with are the very same issues people with membership forms are dealing with. So I could say from birth, we've been part of the struggle, we've been witnessing challenging times from either a family or a community or a society. So from birth, basically.
And maybe let's take it a step further and just look at your childhood and where you grew up. And I know that Nelson Mandela University, you're an alumni of Nelson Mandela University. So how was that, and how did you end up at Nelson Mandela University?
2006, I did my first year up. It was challenging. If you recall, at the time, there was a lot of issues with space. Residencies were not enough to accommodate the number of students. And we did not have a safe campus at the time. You'll recall that there were people that were assaulted on campus, mugged on campus, especially in the streets like Egomeri and stuff. There was a lot of crime that was happening there. So those were the issues that we're facing as the students at the time.
And ATM, we're sitting here with a live audience from ATM. I'm loving the black zipparate. Beret. I'm loving the black berets and the regalia. So how did you get to be convinced and to be appointed as the leader of the African Transformation Movement? In my research, I saw that you haven't really spoken much about the inception of ATM, where it started, who was in the room, who came up with the name ATM, and what was happening. So can you take us through that process? Because I believe it's important in order for us to sort of have a clear direction of where we're going. We need to have a clear picture of where we come from. So how did that come about, and how was your name thrown into the mix? What happened?
Look, there was a discussion amongst the indigenous churches like Amazayoni, 12 Apostles Church in Christ, Amanazareta. The biggest issue that we're facing as these churches, as the indigenous churches, is that we did not have a voice in terms of the government. You'll recall that from time to time, the ruling party used to go to these churches for campaigns, but after getting into government, They consult with the ACCC, which is the South African Council of Churches, and the other indigenous churches, in other words, the Inkonzo Skamoya, Inkonzo Zesintu, were not accommodated. If you look at the chaplains that operate in the hospitals, that operate in government functions, they are not coming from these churches, so they did not have a voice. So they've been engaging with the ruling party, they've been trying to engage the government. So in 2017, a decision was taken to have a South African Council of Messianic Churches. Now, this council decided to have a church and state desk, whereby there's going to be someone who's going to be engaging to government on behalf of the church, meaning on behalf of these churches. And I was given that responsibility, but we're not winning, because you know how those people are. If it's not elections, they're not going to listen to you. So from there was a discussion to say, let's do things on our own. Let's have our own political party. That will be our own voice. That will raise issues on behalf of these institutions. Now, this political party was widely accepted to an extent whereby even traditional leaders wanted to get involved, even community leaders wanted to get involved. And they said, we do not want another Christian party, which is a party that is going to be limited to the Christian faith. We want a faith-based organization, something that will accommodate everyone. So that is why ATM is a faith-based organization. It accommodates people from different backgrounds, different belief systems. So I think my name came about as when the discussions were made somewhere there.
Somewhere there.
Somewhere there.
That's interesting. The policy direction from inception, we know when we look at other parties, we know what their policy stance on many issues are. If you look at EFF, you know that they have a robust left socialist agenda. If you look at the DA, you know that they are for the free market economy, so to say. So in terms of ATM, I've watched the ATM, I've seen you in parliament, I've seen you sometimes siding with the EFF, I've seen you thrown out of parliament with the EFF, I've seen you have a robust, that EFF robust nature. Maybe, let me ask you this, why are you not an EFF member?
Because ATM is the best party, and ATM is the only party that has got practical solutions. It is a party, most importantly, that is funded by its own members. It is not dependent on anyone. We do not have any billionaire or millionaire that will influence.
EFF is funded by its own members?
Sure.
I mean, the president has made a call for ground forces to fund the EFF.
If you can start from inception, from the time ATM was formed, from the time ATM contested its very first elections, the monies and the resources that were used did not come from anyone besides the members. I could not say the same about other parties.
So the country is in a lot of trouble. We are plagued with load shedding. We live with load shedding. Unemployment is it's at an all-time high. Even to a certain extent, the education that all of you are here for does not guarantee that you'll get a job once you graduate. GPV is an issue. The inequality rate, I think it was a couple of years ago when it was announced that South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. Here we are sitting with student leaders, we are sitting with young people. You are a young person yourself. What are some of your solutions to all of these things?
I think the core of the solutions lies in the type of leadership that is there. Because if you can check the nature of policies could be there, but if you do not have the right driver, a vehicle is a choice. A vehicle will swerve out of the road because the people that are driving the vehicle do not have the best interest of the passengers in the vehicle. So at the core of our problems in the country is what type of leadership do we have? I want to make an example. In March, there was a shutdown. You saw when there was a shutdown, we saw the attitude and the energy from the current government in terms of deploying amajoni, deploying the police, deploying all manner of security personnel to actually deal with that shutdown. And you ask yourself, where is this energy when, illegal miners are terrorizing communities, when the GBV rate is very high, and when communities are, they are dealt with by criminals? So you find that the root of our problems is the political will that stems from not having the right leaders. So our call as the ATM is to have servant leaders who understand that they are there either as the presidents, as ministers, not on their own, not of their own making, but they are there on behalf of the people. They are there to serve the people. So that is where we need to start. Now, practically, we've got a few things because of time that I would want to touch base on. Education system, because we believe that we need to deal with the education system so that our future gets to be brighter. What needs to change in the education system is that it needs to be skills-based, meaning it needs to have, we need to develop skills in the young people that are in the education system so that by the time a person reaches matric, they can have a skill they can use, to make a living for their own. Currently, education system yethu is making, young people to have to apply for jobs. If they are not getting any form of employment, they do not have any skill they could use. So that is why you are saying it needs to be skills-based. And skills-based in the sense that you've got the digital economy. With the digital economy, we see how people are creating apps, making money out of those apps. But why aren't we teaching our young people to be able to create apps that will add value to the communities and make a living out of those apps? There's even the technical skills, like your carpentry, your technical skills, like your being an electrician. So those are the things that we as the ATM are saying that by the time a young person reaches matric, they must have a skill they can utilize. On the issue of the economy, we believe that the biggest problem that we have is that South Africa is a consuming economy. We're not manufacturing anything. We take our jobs, we take them to China. If, for example, we can look at all of the equipment that we have here, maybe this pen is made in China, your phone is made in China, the jacket is made in China.
It's made in South Africa.
Okay, I'm not sure. But even our plates, you check they're made in China. And if you look at, for example, the infrastructure in terms of the factories, we used to have factories, they are there now, but they are white elephants because there is no companies that are operating because everything that we use is coming from another country. So we believe as the ATM that the infrastructure is there, the market is there, but what is lacking is government intervention to make sure that jobs do stay in our country by producing locally. I'm sure since you've done research that we as the ATM were very bold and unapologetic about buying from locally produced products, companies, because we believe that if we want to transform the economy, our spending habits need to change as well. There's no way you are going to be talking about how white monopoly capital is dominating our spaces, our economy, whereas we are the ones who take our own money to them. Then the last issue is the issue of crime. We believe as the ATM that we need to go very hard on criminals because currently South Africans are held hostage by criminals. And you find that it's very difficult for criminals to arrest criminals. Look at, for example, how some of the government ministers are implicated in wrongdoing. There is this cartel that is involved in the ESCOM looting. Guess who's there? It's ministers. Yeah, but,
Which ministers?
Which ministers? Which ministers? I'm not in parliament, so I'm not protected, you know. If I could say in parliament, there's no one who's going to fight me, but here, it's a different story. But the root cause of the problems that we have in our country is that the leaders that are elected and are trusted to govern in the best interest of the country are the ones that are actually doing the opposite. So that is why at the core of any solution lies in what type of leaders do we have. If we can have the best policies, we could have the best programs, but if the leaders are the same, there's nothing that's going to change.
And I'm going to ask maybe this last question, and I'm going to invite people from the audience. There's a mic there that we can use. So if anyone has a question, someone can just assist me there, and we can engage on some of these issues that the president is speaking about. Two questions. One, I'm still not clear about the ideological stance of ATM. I don't know whether ATM is a socialist organization, is a capitalist organization. Can you shed some light on that? Secondly, land. We know what other parties have been saying. You've probably been part of some of the parliamentary discussions on land. There are young people here. Some of them, maybe their parents have land, but they don't have the right equipment to monetize that land. But some of them, maybe they don't have land, and they would want to get into farming, they would want to own properties and all sorts of things. So can you shed some light on what the stance of the African transformation movement is on land and your ideological position? Where do you fit in the spectrum?
Let me start with land. We as the ATM believe in land expropriation without compensation. However, we differ with the current proposal because it starts from 1912, meaning all land that has been dispossessed after 1912 is the one that falls within the bracket of expropriation. Whereas in our view, Jan van Riebeeck landed in South Africa or arrived in South Africa in 1652, and bulk of the land dispossession happened before 1913. Therefore, you can't say to people that you are going to have a cut-off whereby you are going to start from 1913 onwards. The other land that was dispossessed before 1913, you are not going to touch it. That is our biggest issue as to what exactly is the timeline. We believe that land expropriation, the bill that is currently proposed, must start from 1652, not start in 1913. That is the first issue. The second issue is that we need a heavy investment in terms of training and giving resources to people to get to use the land. Rightfully, as you are saying, in the Eastern Cape, there's a lot of land there. And previously, in the early 90s, there were tractors that were deployed to communities. There were seeds that were deployed to communities so that people are able to work the land. But we saw a disinvestment in terms of what the government is doing by not capacitating the people in terms of making use of the land and not giving them enough resources and equipment to actually work the land. So for us as the ATM, what the government can do right now is not to wait up until the bill is passed, but rather say, if you've got land now, we're going to help you farm. We're going to help you be able to make a living of the land that we have currently. We're not going to wait up until these political parties decide because, again, the political parties are influenced by their funders. You find that some of the funders that are involved, for example, that are owning farms, there's no way a farm owner would invest in a political party and later on that same political party votes in support of land expropriation. So that is another thing that is misleading the people because they think they are voting for those individuals, not knowing that the people who actually call the shots, it is the funders that are behind the political party leaders. So we as a party were a social democratic party that believes that we need to share the resources and the government needs to play a critical role. That is why we don't agree with the nature and the posture of this current government because we find that the government, instead of having government interventions on the problems, it wants to privatize the country. Look at, for example, how many times Mr. Ramaphosa said we're going to get into a private and public partnership. It means that he's taking the capacity from government to the private sector. The private sector's sole existence, it is to create profit, whereas the government ought to be the one that is leading the conversation or leading the intervention so that people do not become victims or do not become victims of a private sector. Look at, for example, the issue of e-communications. We used to have post office that was very effective and functional to an extent whereby people, they never knew of any other company in that space. But look now, they destroyed the post office to create space for ODHL and Postnet and all of these other companies.
Who's they?
It is the the capital that is controlling and influencing the politicians that we have in our country. And some of them, they've got shares. Go to Parliament, the disclosure of financial interest. Look at all of the ministers. Look at Opravin Gordhan. He's got shares in Bidvest, in FNB, in all of these banks. There's no way such a person would actually advocate for, in fact, actually drive a process whereby the state must be empowered. Look at Utito Mboweni, who was a Minister of Finance. He also has got shares in all of these companies, particularly in the banking sector. And you ask yourself, Okoba, can a person who's a Minister of Finance, who's got shares in banks, be the one that will spearhead the creation of a state bank? It's impossible. Look what they did to him. He was a minister for quite some time. Immediately after he was removed, or he left being a minister, he becomes part of the board, Old Mutual. The very same Old Mutual that has disinvested from South Africa, because now they are no longer in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, they're in the London Stock Exchange. So that is why we are saying as the ATM, at the core of our problems is that you have political party leaders who are not servants of the people. We've got political party leaders who are actually doing the bidding for all of these companies they are given shares in. Look at, for example, the issue of unions. Some of these union leaders have got interest in labor brokers, like Transman, Kempston, etc. The very same unions that should be advocating for workers' rights, but these labor brokers are the ones that are actually killing our workers. But the very same unions that you trust to be on the side of the workers, they're actually on the side of capital in the form of those labor broker companies.
There's a roaming mic, so we'll be taking a couple of questions just in 1 second. The chief, is it the chief strategist or the chief policy officer? I'm not sure what Mzwanele Manye's role was in the African Transformation Movement. He has ditched ATM and is gone to EFF. Is that not a statement of not so much of confidence in the African Transformation Movement? Is that not a bad reflection of the capabilities or the potential of African Transformation Movement? How did you take that statement and that public posture that he took when he went and joined? And he's been so vocal. He's been, posting about what a great leader Julius Malema is and all of. So how does that make you feel? I'm sure you are close with him. How does that make you feel? What do you think of this issue?
Look, his resignation was more about him and less about the party. Because if you read his statement, he's not saying the ATM, firstly, there was conflict or there were issues or ATM is not growing. In his own statement, he attests that ATM is growing. However, he feels that he's more best aligned in terms of whatever that he feels best there instead of the ATM. So it's a personal preference, really, whereby a person feels they could be better suited in a certain place, but that does not mean there's a problem or the place that they were in, there's no prospect of growth, because in his own statement, he attests that ATM is growing and ATM is going to surprise people. Look at, for example, what's going to happen at the stadium on Saturday. That will be another, it's going to be one of those statements ATM is making that it is a growing party. Look, we're the first organization in 2018 to launch our manifesto. We're the first organization now to actually launch our elections campaign. And that is a sign of a party that is growing. Like I remember one was in matric, not even in first year, but they were already doing the work that will be done by a trainee accountant when they are done with their degree with the Become Accounting Yab. So it is because of that. That is why white people always are ahead of us, because they do not need to wait up until they are done with a qualification to be exposed to the work of that particular qualification. Now, when the government is able to intervene, it is able to place abantu in some of these companies, including the government agencies, so that they are able to have the experience. The issue of the jobs for young people, we believe as the ATM that there needs to be that buffer that is whereby the young people get to be exposed in terms of job opportunities. For example, the issue of waitering. A lot of young people in the past used to survive on waitering. The upper school, there was a lot of activities. Whenever there are campus activities, would be the ones that are doing a job for 2 to 3 hours, get paid 150 per hour. So that, for us as the ATM, is one of the critical priorities whereby the job market must be able to absorb young people and not wait for young people to actually finish their qualifications. Now, the relationship between TACC and ATM, TACC is one of the churches that was behind the forming of the South African Council of Churches. Now, there's majority of ATM members, you could say they're coming from TACC. So it's bound to happen that, for example, when they engage, when they talk about issues, it's like, for example, if you are going to have, let's say there's a society that has 80% of the membership being women, what's going to happen is that chances are most of the discussions, will be based on what the women are saying because they are the majority. So it happens a lot whereby if the majority, if I can make another example, if you have a society whereby 80-90% ngamaXhosa, you find that from time to time, because of isiXhosa, but you find that a lot of people might misconceive that as if ezinye abanye abantu abafuna because kuthethwa isiXhosa apha. But kuthethwa isiXhosa because it's the most natural thing to do when you are with omnye umuntu ongumXhosa. But what we try to encourage to the ATM members to be accommodative in the sense that we're a faith-based organization. That is why if you were to listen or watch our videos as we are launching, kukhona amagqirha ahambayo, abantu bahamba bazophahla. There are also Muslims who play a role. I remember in Mpumalanga, the party there in the Gersibande district, one of the most prominent leaders is actually a Muslim. So it is accommodative to everyone. So it's one of those things whereby if the majority of Abantu in a certain area are coming from a particular institution or organization, the weakness there is that they may want to use, or they may, without even being aware, but they may talk about izinto of the organization abazana ngayo. It's like, for example, if you can take 20 of you kutambani niyofunde China, chances are you want to talk about South Africa because you are coming from one area and you've got this thing that brings you together. Also, on a lighter note, there's a friend of mine who went to Texas in the USA. Uthi xa ifika phayana airport, over a guy ithetha isiZulu. The way he was so happy because over umuntu othetha isiZulu, a language that he can relate to. So even though they went there for a work purpose, what eventually happened is that he got more close with the one who thetha isiZulu, and he neglected some of his teammates who are also South African, but abangathethi isiZulu. So that is what is a teething problem, yabo, based on the abantu being familiar to each other, based on the organization that they are coming from. But it is not to say that is who we are. Who we are, see, organization that is accommodative to each and every person, regardless of sexual orientation, their belief. Any person that is wanting to transform this country is more than welcome.
We're going to take the last round of hands, and I've already noted that there's one. You'll be number one. So if you can just come up front, please, so that we can just prepare to take your questions. But my last question to you would be, what is your message to young people? What is your message to students? When I was at this institution, I remember that the SRC budget was around 3 million rands. I stand to be corrected. The SRC had a budget of around 3 million rands. majority of that budget at times was used for parties. It was used for buying, nice SRC uniform, nice briefcases and stuff like that. It was used for questionable items. And at that time, whatever political party, student political party was leading, there wasn't any clear program of action that is student-centered. So I'd like you to just think about what your message is to young people and to students. And I'd like to couple that with this question. What are the clear, if tomorrow the ATM here gets a majority in the SRC, I'm not sure when the elections are for SRC politics. If you've got majority, September, if tomorrow you guys from ATM become majority in that SRC, what are the different things that you guys are going to do? I'll give you an example. I heard, I'm not an EFF member, but I heard that the EFF in one of the institutions, they suspended money that was going to be used for a student freshet society. They channeled it to be used for student food parcels because that was a challenge at that university. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm not a member of the FNSF, but this is lovely. This is servant leadership. So what will you guys be doing? And I'm asking you, but I'm also asking them, what will you guys be doing different? So that's my final question to you, President. Okay, let's go number 1, number 2, number 3. Just make sure that mic is on, please. Yes, is it on?
Okay, I have my question concerns the land expropriation. Mr. President raised an issue that the current bill of land expropriation, they are not agreeing with it, just because it only starts on 1912, and they hope to pursue a land expropriation approach which starts in 1652. Then around that time, blacks were not deemed to own land. Hence, they were evicted, and there is no record of ownership of land. And through registration, only whites or colonists became rightful owners of the land. Then my question is, would that not be in conflict with United Nations values, which are peace and security?
Would that not be in conflict with what?
With United Nations values. United Nations values, which is peace and security.
Peace and security, okay.
Yeah, like the expropriation of land.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
That's the second.
Thank you. My name is Sanele Ntolo. Ndicela ukuphendula the last question, because my question was about what you've asked was. As ATSM, kwi-problem yabafundi, which is accommodation, nazo zonke ezi problems nazo, registration, zonke ezi problems. Into besithetha ngayo ukuthi singaya kwi-management, sithethe ne-management ukuthi how about i-students ziregister, because i-students ezingavunyelwa ziregister i-student already esezinetyala. So if i-student ziyavunyelwa ziregister, aba bantu kuthiwa mabangaregister mhlambe ba-owisha 100 and something thousand kwi-institution, so angasavunyelwa umuntu aregister. That means i-institution per one person ilose 100 and something thousand ngomuntu oyi-1 ongazoregister, and loya muntu naye uluze i-future yakhe, akazukwazi ukuqhubekeka yahamba ephambili. So thina as i-ATSM, into esithetha ngayo sithi, we will go to institution, talk with the management, sibuze. My question to the president, benizobuza uba, is it possible now for universities ukuba zenze zixhumane ne-companies even nakwezinye i-countries, kuthethwe ne-companies ukuze i-students maziregister ngetyala zikwazi uba ziphume e-university zihambe ziyosebenza kwezinye i-countries, ukwazi uba leso student esiregister safunda sagqiba ngetyala sizosayina iform ezothi Mna if ndiyaphangela ndizobhatala a certain percentage kwi-university until ndiyigqibe. So i-university umsebenzi wayo ukuthi mayihambe ke ngoyifunele this student umsebenzi kwenzela uba student sikwazi uba sibe ne-future and i-university ikwazi ukubhataleka imali yabo. My question to Mr. President was that i-possible naleyo nto uba i-universities zingayenza because leyo nto ebesicinga uba thina ezifonayo ngayo solution, because we can talk about the thing of i-food parcel. I-food parcels ukudla okuthengiweyo i-student ezingabuzwanga uba zona zifuna ntoni as i-student. So how about ke ngoku kwizinto ze-food parcel, if i-university iyakwazi ukukhupha i-food parcels per month ikhuphele i-student, how about le mali ye-food parcel isiwe straight to i-student zizithengele zona izinto ezikwazi uba zizenze, because zikhona izinto esizinikwa kwi-food parcel ongeke ukwazi ukuzitya kodwa ubuyidinga le mali. So if ubuyinikwa imali, that means if ikhona imali yobuthenga food parcel, that means unayo ikhona imali yobungayinikwa ukwazi ukuyozithengela ezo zinto. So saying yethu as i-ATSA. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Last question.
Thank you very much once again, Speaker. I know bungafuna uninika, but this looks professional to me. Speaker, to you, Mr. President. Mr. President, ndive i-campaign yakho 2 weeks ago, yabo, and I was very interested in i-campaign yakho because I heard your manifesto 2018. Nam ndisithande siyafana mina now because ni politics ndisithande. Ndisithande since birth. So now I'm a politician, ndihamba nje ndilapha. Mr. President, ndiyabuza uba if now uyi president next year, of which ungayiyo i-president next year, because ndikubona sowuyiyo right now. If uyi president next year, because ndiyabona ezinye political parties ziyahamba, ndingasengqeleni ke mna ke ndiyayazi be-ATM futhi le nto yasengqeleni nayo. If Mr. President ungabekwa as a president, ungaya kwaba bantu aba the same people aba bakuvoteleyo aba ubelentu bakubekele uX phayana lento keni kwi-ballot paper pakwa IEC, ungaya phindela futhi kubo uyolento kuyo umani uyobanika nayo lento lento ki-food parcels, because I've seen other political parties ziyahamba zifike nelento ko-national uvuba hayi upresident lento Ramaphosa ulento upresident Steenhuisen uyafike lento ke eBanningville lento 13. Silento ungenza njani wena as ulento upresident, if ungabekwa as upresident ungangabi nazo na empty promises as lento upresident? What is your own manifesto wena as a president? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions. Yeah. Let me start with the last question. I'll say what is important for us is to empower people. If food parcel must be something yoku balances. It must not be a permanent program of government to say you are going to be giving people food parcels, because it means people will always be depending on the government. But once you empower people, then abantu will have their own mechanisms of ukuzenzela what they want to eat. What they are going to eat is not going to be dependent on a politician or a food parcel. Umntu uzoba nesidima sokuba as I'm eating this supper tonight, ndiyitya ngamandla am. So that is why for us as the ATM, empowerment is very important. That is why we want to shy away from anything ebulala ingqondo yabantu. Because in the ebulala ingqondo yabantu, perhaps I could say the poverty is deliberate in our country. Because the people that are poor, you can control them. Uyakwazi banikeza food parcels and uthi vote for me because yazi ba lo muntu utye ngenxa yakho. I went to campaign at Tembisa 2020. I met a young gentleman, almost my age, and I went said, no, you must vote for the ATM. This guy is saying he's already voted for the ruling party. And I asked him, are you working? What do you know? But why are you voting for the ruling party? And his answer was, they gave me 350. So that is the nature of the government. Because the nature of the government, they've realized, Okoba, the more people are empowered and the more they are able to live on their own, then they lose them as their voters. So that is why for us it's critical into empowerment. Okoba, let's empower people. When a person is without means and kunzima kuye, yes, a food parcel must be the order of the day. But a food parcel is something that should never be permanent. What should be permanent is that how fine we can identify ukoba unengxaki, give you a food parcel for that time. But to say, how then do we give you, if you know says lalin, you've got igadi, how do we give you seeds, sutrain ufame, so that ukutya ozokutya after the food parcel iphelile, ukutya ozenzele wena ngokunokwakho. So that is our thinking as the ATM. The other question was relating to, can we partner, or can universities partner with companies so that whoever that is employed, is a student, is able to work with a certain company and then later on akwazi ubhatala fees. You'll recall that a few years ago, there's a university eyakhiweyo ePretoria, Centurion, ekuthiwa yintoni kane, I forgot the name. No, not leyo. Le iyakhiwe Solidarity, which is le iyakhiwe ngamabhulu, because they were responding to Africans being taken out as a medium of instruction at Tuks, at Stellenbosch. I forgot the name. But when I was doing research, that university is actually a training ground for other Afrikaners. Because in Afrikaner, uzohamba uyofunda phayana, as efuna experience, there's another Afrikaner company, ezothi, I need lawyers, ayithathe phayana, I need accountants, bayithathe phayana, we need marketers, bayithathe phayana. That is why you find ukuba, this joke imani bakhona ku social media, we've never seen a white intern. We've never seen white people actually applying for jobs. It is because they are able to link the educational institutions they are in control of. Abona lena is the one that is openly by control. But previously, or Tuks, or UOFs, or Stellenbosch, even Nangoko, the same arrangement is second. So, but that is why you find where we need to hold our own leaders accountable, is that when they get to such spaces, they do not open the doors for abantu abamnyama. Umntu relaxela avuyele yena ukuba ephayana. So the answer is yes, but what is needed is a political will from the side of management to say, I'm going to create opportunities. For example, if you look at the nature of iGqeberha, there are some economies as ikoyo apa. For example, there's going to be Ikucha, the IDZ Ikucha, whereby the university can try and have an arrangement with the companies as operator apa, so that umntu athi xa igqiba akwazi to be opened a space for. Not lena whereby once you are done as a person, if particularly as a young black person, you are on your own. The other question is the land expropriation versus United Nations. The issue of the international organizations, we need to view that, we need to be cautious when viewing London. For example, look at the issue of ICC, International Criminal Court. It's an international organization. You had Britain and America in the early 2000s invading Iraq because they were wanting weapons of mass destruction. They were never found, those weapons of mass destruction. And in the process, babulala abantu abaninzi. Name one leader, either from America or from Britain, who's ever been arrested or charged by the ICC. No one. So the issue that we have, we've got these international bodies that ought to be the what you call the international or the overall bodies that are there to manage relations with other countries, but they don't do that. Instead, they perpetuate the imperialism by making sure that whatever that is done in the developing countries always benefits the developed countries. Look what they did to Zimbabwe. There was land expropriation without compensation, Payana. They responded by sanctions. Sanctions because it is the white farmers who were creating wealth for the British, who are abathathelwa ifama Payana. So you find that these international organizations, they are not objective, they are not neutral, they are there to pursue into it. You want to maintain the status quo of the world powers, which is the bigger countries. Then the last question was, what is the message to young people? I would say to young people, let's all adopt a principle 80, nothing about us without us. Because if we adopt that principle, there's no way Tina Esizoti we don't involve ourselves in politics. Because a lot of young people, they don't involve themselves in politics, yet politics is the reason why they are unfunded, is the reason why they are struggling with their accommodation, is the reason why they are getting, excuse my French, a crappy educational system. That is because of politics. Now, when you adopt a principle, it's nothing about me without me as a young person, then you are going to be more hands-on and more involved in shaping a future yakho ne future yabantwana bakho. Because the country that we are living in now, we see the crime rate, we see the unemployment, we see all of these things as wrong that are happening. But the biggest question that we need to ask ourselves is, what are we doing in order to shape the direction of the country? Because if future is not go 2040, if future is not go 2030, if future is now in this context that, look at, for example, the issue of load shedding. Is load shedding a result of a decision it happened last week? Load shedding is a result of a decision that would have been taken go year 2000. Now, can you imagine, Apa Okoba, we are not as young people deliberate in terms of creating the kind of future that we want. If you look at the voters, the biggest chunk of Abantu who are at the voting age, it is Abantu between the ages of 18 and 21. The rest of the other groups, bambalwa gqithi as compared to this particular one. But the biggest chunk of Abantu abangavotiyo ngaba who ought to vote for their future. Abona abantu abavotayo ngaba funeka sibabele i-ID most next year ndithi. Sibafihlele i-ID because siyabazi ba xa bevota bavotela utata owaswelekayo ongazubanceda. Thina kufuneka sivotile, because I want to stress this, there is no future without having different type of leaders in South Africa. Forget about it. Because clearly, with the past 5 years, past 10 years, past 15 years, there is no country as by South Africa in the next coming years. You know, look at what happened in 2020 or 2021, the looting at KZN. A lot of people, they want to limit Lanto to the former President Zuma and it kunjalo. But the truth is, the reason why there was looting, it is because of the unemployment and poverty. Take a truck ngoku ungene elokishini. I-truck mhlawumbe masithi abantu bayabona ukuba kukhona isonka okanye there is something of value in that truck. Look waba kuzokwenzeka ntoni. It's going to be looted. Is it because uJZ ubanjiwe? The answer is no. It is because abantu belambile. That is what we are going to have. So that is why as young people, we need to ask ourselves, ukuba this country esifuna ukuphila kuyo, what are we doing now in order to have that type or that kind of a country? There is no way uzohlala phansi, you do nothing, and you expect by one day uzolala, wake up the next day, you are living in a better country. That is not going to happen. So, young people, let's adopt into it nothing about us without us. And let us change again the nature in which we approach our politics. Because a lot of people approach politics ngokufuna ukulwa, of wanting to be divided, of wanting to be enemies. And I was saying to another person, in parliament, you find that kuyaheklishwana when the cameras are on, abantu bayathukana, but behind closed doors, when the cameras are off, abantu, they are best of friends. They even attend their weddings, there's a bar, basela bonke kula bar. But come kuthi, as the people on the ground, we fight against each other because one is wearing a white t-shirt, another one is wearing another t-shirt. So we need, as young people, again, to be solution-orientated. Can you imagine if Diafika Apa, I speak for about 2 hours, and kuyo yonke le 2 hours, I'm dissing uRamaphosa. I'm talking about how big his nose is. I'm talking about zonke ezo zinto. No, there's umzekelo. I'm not saying he's a... I was making an example. The reality is that by the time I've left, there's no solution that I've given you. And the problem, we need to understand ukuba nathi siyi problem, honestly. Because if ndizo debate eParliament for 3 minutes or however minutes, and I speak about solutions, education system, how many of you would engage with that particular clip, which is Oyilaka and Oyisherish? Versus if ndiyafika phayana, I speak about, Mr. Ramaphosa, you are one person, we are like a man who gets on top and does nothing. How many of you will actually engage with that? A lot of you. So you find that the problem is that each society leans more on izinto that are not of value. And you find that izinto that are of value as a progressive, they are not really interested in. Yeah, but so if you want change in our country, you are the ones that need to change first. Because if you change, then there'll be change. Thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President. Thank you all so much for taking part in this discussion. I just have one more. It's not a question. I just want you to give me your thoughts. I'm going to give you a couple of names. I just want you to give me your thoughts on these names. The first thing that comes into your mind, as honest as possible. Ne? Okay, John Steenhuisen.
DA,
Julius Malema.
EFF,
Nelson Mandela.
ANC,
President. Helen Zille.
Godzilla.
Okay, give me what you honestly think about these people. Okay, give me what do you think about John Steenhuisen?
A racist.
What do you think about Julius Malema?
He's an EFF leader.
Okay. What?
Sorry, he's an EFF leader that loves ATM.
Okay. Okay. What do you think about Helen Zille?
She's someone who should have retired from politics, but is still staying in politics. But because it's a white person, no one is complaining.
What? Okay. What do you think about Musi Maimane?
He's unsure of what needs to be done. On one time, he is advocating for independent candidates. On the other time, he wants to lead a party, so he's not really certain.
Last person, Herman Mashaba.
He paid 12.5 million for someone to write his own book, and he said he was not involved in the writing of that book.
Okay. Thank you so much.